Hello, lovely viewers. You are most welcome to our channel Poetry Online. In this video, we're going to be discussing a traditional Ewe poem titled A Baby is a European. Kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to get updates on all our new videos. Once again, let us assure you of a very interesting discussion. Get ready for this lesson. The coming of the white man brought many things along with it, one of the most enduring being their culture or ways of life. The European culture introduced strange and surprising things to Africans. Most of such things were easily rejected, while a few, especially material artifacts, were enthusiastically embraced by both commoners and nobilities. As Africans got more and more exposed to European ways of life, through Western education, they found more aspects of it very fascinating but complicated. The Ewes, after their encounter with the whites, happened to experience this uncanny fascination. Yet, the familiar, simple, and natural lives of the people seems too enriching and graceful to be abandoned. They saw a sharp contrast between them and the Europeans. This poem, A Baby is a European, is set in the colonial or post-colonial times. The traditional order in the Ewe community has been supplanted by the new but foreign culture. Africans in this situation see a huge contradiction, and those who are conscious of it live with the emotions of humiliation. The poem focuses on the popular theme of clash of cultures in African literature. It explores the African culture and Western or European culture. In doing this, the poet uses a baby and an implied adult, who is the speaker, to draw a similarity between the way babies behave and the way wannabe Europeans behave. The poem uses the baby to depict the complexity of dealing with the excesses of the Africans who aspire to be like the whites. Just like a baby, the traditional people cannot understand the blind imitators of the white man's culture, since they do not speak their own language, they don't eat their own food, neither do they make any efforts whatsoever to tolerate or learn the African culture. Both thematically and structurally, the poem makes use of contrast. The main idea in the poem is developed around the contrasting lifestyle of the baby to that of his parents. The baby and the parents are used symbolically to represent the different cultures of people from these geographical entities. The baby represents the Western culture and everything it embodies, while the parents and the speaker represents the African culture and everything it embodies. The poem tries to examine which of the two is most suitable for the African, or which of them fits perfectly into the African context. The major themes of the poem revolves around conflicts of cultures. The cultures in question are the European culture and the African culture. Even though the baby of the parents is not an European by descent, he or she exhibits behaviors that align most closely with European culture than that of the African culture. The Europeans, ever since their arrival in Africa, use derogatory terms to describe the African culture and general ways of life. They made no effort whatsoever to understand or learn the African culture and insisted on their own culture. This is exactly what a baby does. It cannot speak any language, yet it wants to be understood. It does not eat the food the rest of the family eats. It cries and imposes its will on its parents and lacks understanding, compassion, and empathy. Thus, the speaker compares the behavior of the baby to that of the Europeans since they share similar undesirable traits. The colonial and post-colonial periods were characterized by the exploitation and servitude of Africans in the hands of the Western world. This is the same thing that happens when parents have a child. This era marked the rejection of anything African and the forceful imposition of European culture and general ways of life on the people of Africa. The diction of the poet is simple and uses everyday language to convey its message. The negative effects of the coming of the Europeans affects the core values of Africans, depriving them of their unique identities and creating both intra and inter-conflicts as a result of the introductions that the Europeans made into the mainstream African life. The setting of the poem is Africa, though it can be narrowed down to Togo, where the Eves predominantly live. The temporal setting of the poem is clearly the colonial era or pre-independence period. This point can be understood in two levels. The first group of people considered a baby in the poem as the Europeans themselves and how they rejected everything African. This is based on the belief that when you go to Rome, you do what Romans do. But this is not what the Europeans did when they came to Africa. When the Europeans came to Africa, they rejected everything African, branded them with derogatory terms, and insisted on their own ways of life, or imposed their ideas on the African people. The second group of people considered a baby as all the Africans who have rejected their own culture in the hot pursuit of European culture. With the colonization of the African continent and the subsequent introduction of Western values and ways of life, many Africans, especially those educated in the Western ways, consciously distance themselves from the traditional beliefs, practices, and general ways of life of their people. They saw them in the light their white masters would have them do. They saw them as primitive, retrogressive, and even barbaric. The new African educated elites, especially in West Africa, were eager to look like, behave like, sound like, and act like the whites, as they saw the white man's culture as a standard for measuring civility and excellence. It was an era for praise for the white man's values and civilization, as well as the conscious attempts to denigrate African values or look down on the few who treasured it among the new educated elites. Psychologically, it was a time when many of the new educated elites grappled with cultural complex, an inferiority complex for that matter. Let's take our first reading of the poem. A baby is a European. He does not eat our food. He drinks from his own water pot. A baby is a European. He does not speak our tongue. He is cross when his mother understands him not. A baby is a European. He cares little for others. He forces his will on his parents. A baby is a European. He is always very sensitive. The slightest scratch on his skin results in an ulcer. Let's now take a detailed analysis of the lines contained in the poem, starting with the title of the poem, A Baby is a European. The title of the poem, A Baby is a European, clearly informs readers that, in this poem, there is going to be a comparison between the lifestyle of a baby to that of a European. There is a transfer of meaning here. That is to say, the attributes of a baby is given to the wannabe Europeans. The title of the poem, A Baby is a European, is metaphorical, since the baby is not a European by birth or race, but the speaker uses it to draw a sharp contrast or difference between the behavior of the baby, or the behavior of the wannabe Europeans, and that of his parents, who are evidently Africans. The persona of the poem is clearly a patriotic African who is not pleased with the behavior of the Europeans, or Africans who have left their culture to shamelessly and blindly adopt the ways of the white man. The poem is a free verse. It is a lyric poem as it expresses the feeling of the poem about the sharp contrast between the behaviors of a child and his parents. The poem has 4 stanzas with 3 lines each. The repeated refrain, A Baby is a European, highlights the disconnection or disparities between traditional values and the ways in which modernity and globalization influence the next generation. Refrains are popular devices in speeches because repetition is memorable, musical, and can help to give a common structure and meaning to disparate ideas. These qualities are particularly important in speeches because the audience must be able to understand and remember complex ideas without the ability to rewind or parse a phrase for its meaning. Writers use refrains in their poems in order to drive a point home, aid a reader or listener's memory, establish central themes, and create structure. Repeated words or phrases stick more easily in a reader or listener's mind and accentuate the structure and rhythm of what is being said. Let us now take the analysis of the first stanza of the poem. A baby is a European. He does not eat our food. He drinks from his own water pot. The first stanza of the poem begins with the speaker telling us why he thinks the baby is a European. The speaker shows one area where the baby and the wannabe Europeans share a similar behavior. One aspect of culture that determines a person's culture is the food they eat. Food is a fundamental aspect of culture, serving as a reflection of a community's history, values, and social practice. The first line of the poem introduces the subject of the poem, the baby, while also suggesting a cultural distinction. The phrase, as a European, implies a sense of strangeness or weirdness, setting the stage for a comparison between the baby or the Africans who blindly imitated the Western culture and the traditional values of the speaker's culture. The second line of the poem highlights one significant cultural difference. The baby's refusal to eat our food suggests a disconnect from the traditional dietary practices of the speaker's culture, emphasizing the idea that the baby embodies a different cultural identity other than what they know and cherish. This baby in the poem then transforms from the dictionary definition of the lexical item baby that we all know and attains the connotative meaning of Africans who abandoned their own culture to adopt the white man's culture. The third line of the poem reinforces the idea of selfishness or separation. These are undesirable characteristics which are absent in the African culture but present in the European culture. The African culture preaches a sense of oneness and communal living. That is to say, the African culture preaches communalism, while the European culture preaches individualism. The lexical items, own water pot, symbolizes individuality and perhaps a sense of privilege or superiority, or separation from communal practices. It suggests that the baby is accustomed to different lifestyle, further emphasizing cultural differences. In this stanza, the baby rejects traditional nourishment. Let us move to the second stanza of the poem. A baby is a European. He does not speak our tongue. He is cross when his mother understands him not. The repetition of the lexical items, a baby is a European, serves as a refrain, reinforcing the central theme of loss of cultural identity. It creates a rhythmic structure that emphasizes the differences being explored throughout the poem. This stanza equally exposes another inconsistency between the speaker's culture and that of the baby, who is clearly adopting the European culture. The speaker introduces the idea of language barrier. The inability to communicate in the speaker's language signifies a deeper cultural divide, suggesting that the baby is not only physically different, but also culturally alien. Not only is the baby's language alien to them, he is cross when his mother understands him not. This line invokes sympathy for the baby, illustrating frustration stemming from the miscommunication, but the readers cannot extend such sympathy to the baby because he is the cause of his own problems. This highlights the emotional impact of the cultural differences, suggesting that the baby's experience is marked by isolation and misunderstanding. The baby's actions signify a profound loss of African identity and dignity as he immerses himself in a culture that is not his own. This refusal of the baby to engage with the African languages or food shows a profound loss of African identity and dignity. This mentality is prevalent among Westernized Africans who mistakenly equate proficiency in Western languages with superiority and intelligence. This poem, A Baby is a European, poignantly illustrates the conflicts that arise from the cultural conflict, particularly when the mother struggles to understand her own child who speaks in a different language or her own child who speaks in a foreign language. Let's now move to the third stanza of the poem. A baby is a European. He cares little for others. He forces his will on his parents. This stanza equally begins with a refrain, A baby is a European. This refrain emphasizes the theme of loss of identity, reminding the reader of the ongoing exploration of what it means to be part of a different culture. The eighth line of the poem suggests self-centeredness attributed to the baby, which reflects a cultural critique. It implies that the baby, perhaps due to the influences of European culture, is less aware of the communal values and the importance of social connections. He forces his will upon his parents, showing a lack of respect for family hierarchy. This stanza also brings to mind the assertive, forceful, insistent, and demanding nature of the baby. Just like the Europeans, the baby is forceful with what he wants. This stanza also critiques the selfishness exhibited by the baby, who prioritizes his own desires over communal values. In traditional African society, sharing and communal living are highly valued. Yet, this baby embodies a stark contrast. He refuses to share food, communicate in a native language, or show no respect to his parents. This suggests a clash between traditional expectations of obedience and a more modern individualistic approach to living. Let's now discuss the last stanza of the poem. A baby is a European. He is always very sensitive. The slightest scratch on his skin results in an ulcer. This stanza equally begins with a repetition of A baby is a European. This continues to reinforce the cultural distinction, reminding the reader of the ongoing theme of loss of identity and the implications of being raised in a different cultural context. This stanza introduces the identity of fragility, suggesting that the baby is not only physically sensitive, but also emotionally vulnerable. This reflects vulnerability of the wannabe Europeans, as they are often perceived as needing protection. The final stanza of the poem serves as a powerful metaphor for the consequences of cultural differences. It suggests that even minor challenges can have significant impact on the baby, symbolizing the broader struggles of adapting to a new cultural environment. Moreover, the final stanza of the poem alludes to the potential physical changes the baby has undergone, possibly through bleaching or skin lightening practices, which further emphasizes the theme of identity loss. The poem warns that such alterations can lead to vulnerability, as indicated in the line about developing ulcers from minor injuries. The major themes of this poem are the theme of colonialism, the theme of cultural conflicts, and the theme of loss of identity. Thanks for watching this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video.